האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening, Dober V'Yetzer. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Vayigash. We're going to do section 10, Os Yud. Before we begin, we want to dedicate tonight's learning in the Zera Shimshon for a refuah shlema for Esther Perel Bas Ilana. Esther Perel is a baby, and we wish her a refuah shlema, and we dedicate our learning that she should have a very, very full and speedy recovery and come home from the hospital right away, as fast as possible, by the time the shiur is over, God willing, or as soon as after as is possible. So let's take a look at a pasuk from the Parshas Vayigash. This is Perek Mem Vav pasuk Chaf Tes. Vayesor Yosef merkavto. And Yosef harnessed his chariot. So this is talking about after Yaakov Avinu and the entire family, all of the Jewish people in the world, they weren't called Jews at the time, but all of the descendants of the whole family, all 70 people came down to Mitzrayim, or at least they were 70 once they all got together in Mitzrayim. And Yosef harnessed his chariot, Vaya'al ikras Yisrael aviv Goshna, and he went up towards his father in Goshen. Vayera Elav, and Yosef appeared to his father. Vayipol al tzavarav, and he fell on his neck. He embraced him. Vayefk al tzavarav od, and he cried for a long time on Yaakov's neck. So Yosef comes to see his father Yaakov after all the years apart, and he embraces him and cries for a long time. Let's take a look at what the Zera Shimshon tells us. Pasuk Vayere Lav Vayipol al Tzavarav. The pasuk says, this is the pasuk that we just read, and Yosef appeared to Yaakov and fell upon his neck. Perish Rashi. Rashi explains, Aval Yaakov lo nofal al tzovar Yosef. The pasuk doesn't say that Yaakov also embraced Yosef and fell upon his neck, and velo nishako, and it doesn't say that he kissed him. Lefi shahaya kore eshema, because Yaakov Avinu at this moment was reciting the Kriyat Shema. This is a very well-known, Rashi's bringing in a very well-known teaching of Chazal, that at this climactic moment of Yosef finally being reunited with his father, Yosef cries and hugs his father and embraces him and cries intensely, but Yaakov does not respond in the same way because he is reciting the Shema. Makshim ha'olam, the whole world asks, everybody, all the commentators, and everyone asked the question, Lama dafka kara eshema. Lama dafka kara Yaakov eshema. Why did Yaakov specifically recite the Shema bo'esahi at that time? Shahaya yodea sheyosef boy love. Yaakov knew that Yosef was coming to visit him, so why did he choose to recite the Shema right at the time that Yosef came to visit him? And if you say that it happened to be specifically at that moment, it was the time to recite Shema as in the most ideal way, the way the most righteous people do it, which is just right at sunrise, right before sunrise. And if you say that he what could Yaakov do? He knew Yosef was coming, but the sun was also coming up, and that's the ideal time to say Shema. Kosha al Yosef, then the question becomes on Yosef. Lama lo kira'o afhu ba'esahi. Then why wouldn't Yosef stop and recite the Shema himself? Because this was the most appropriate and ideal moment to recite the Shema. So the Zera Shimshon doesn't love that answer. He says, if you want to say that maybe, of course, Yaakov would not have involved himself in the saying the Shema when he knew Yosef was about to walk in, except it was sunrise, and that's the ideal time to say Shema. So he had to say Shema and the Kriya Shema in the best way, in the best time. So Yosef also should have said Shema. So they couldn't possibly have had a situation in which Yosef is embracing Yaakov, kissing him, crying, etc., and Yaakov is reciting Shema. Yosef would also be reciting Shema if it was sunrise time. So it can't be sunrise. There must be another explanation. V'od kosher, next paragraph. And there's another question. Demipshara kosu nireh sheYaakov ra es Yosef. From the simple reading of the pasuk, it would appear that Yaakov saw Yosef. Demidichsi vayera elov, from the fact that the pasuk specifically says Yosef appeared to Yaakov, mashma, this implies sheYaakov ra also, that Yaakov saw him, the ilav hachi, because if that was not the case, lo osi shapir haloshen shel vayera elov, then the language of the pasuk that Yosef appeared to his father Yaakov would not be the appropriate words to use. In other words, it is possible that a person can come to visit someone and the person who's being visited hasn't yet seen that person. That person comes in and sees in this case, Yosef could have walked in such a time or situation and seen Yaakov, and Yaakov had his face turned, or Yaakov was talking to someone else. There are possibilities that Yosef could have come in and seen Yaakov before Yaakov saw Yosef, and then in such a situation, perhaps Yaakov could be reciting the Shema because he didn't know Yosef had just walked in. That's possible, but that doesn't fit with the words of the pasuk that says, Vayera elov, Yosef appeared to Yaakov. Yaakov saw Yosef, and yet he's saying the Shema. V'im kain, if so, al korchach lomar, you are compelled to say, shemiyad sheYaakov ra oso, at the moment that Yaakov saw Yosef, hischil likros es Shema. That's when he began to say the Shema. V'zeh tema, and this is bewildering. Zera Shimshon says, if we look at all the possible explanations as to why Yaakov Avinu, how and why Yaakov Avinu was reciting the Shema when Yosef came in, every possibility gets eliminated except the one that's really hard to understand, and that is that Yaakov wasn't saying Shema already. He actually waited until Yosef walked in, and when he saw Yosef, that was his cue. That's when he started reciting the Shema. But then the bewildering point that we have to understand is why? Why did Yaakov feel it was necessary to recite the Kriya Shema when he saw Yosef come in? V'gam ein lomar, and we also can't say sheYaakov nosa einov, that Yaakov happened to lift up his eyes, v'ra also, and saw Yosef be'emtza hakriya Shema. In the middle of reciting Shema, Zera Shimshon says, maybe you might think, no. Yaakov didn't start saying the Shema when he saw Yosef. He was already saying the Shema. He didn't know Yosef was about to walk in, so he was already saying the Shema. He's already saying the Shema, and that's when he sees Yosef. Obviously, he can't interrupt the Shema. Well, you might say that, but the Zera Shimshon says, Ein lomar, don't say that. Why not? Shaharei sod hakriya Shema, because the hidden correct way, when we talk about sod, we're talking about the Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic way to say Shema, hu bisigiru de'einin, it is with one's eyes closed. Now, we know that we have a custom, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. When we recite Kriya Shema, we cover our eyes for the first pasuk of Shema Yisrael. We cover our eyes. But Kabbalistically, apparently, the Zera Shimshon is saying there was a custom to close one's eyes for the whole recitation of Shema. So you can't say that Yaakov started to say the Shema and had his eyes closed, and Yosef walked in, and Yaakov saw him. Yaakov couldn't see him. The only way the pasuk can be understood, according to the Zera Shimshon, is that Yaakov was in his residence, his dwelling. Yosef came in. Yaakov saw Yosef and then decided consciously to begin saying the Shema. Why would that be done? Well, that's going to be explained in the next paragraph. V'yuvan, and this can be understood, b'mashe kosfu hamikubolim, with something that was written by the Kabbalists. Sheshma ve'echad heim osios esmach. The word Shema, the first word of the first pasuk, the first word of the recitation of the Shema, the word Shema, ve'echad, and the word echad. So if you look at the first two letters of each of those words, you have a shin and a mem from the word Shema, and you have an aleph and a ches from the word echad, the last word of the first pasuk. And those two letters, if you move them around a little bit, they equal the word esmach, I will rejoice. So Shema and echad, the first two letters, the shin mem, and the first two letters of the last word, the aleph and the ches, give you the word esmach, I will be joyful, I will rejoice. Vidalid rabasi, and the large dalid, which is the way that the word echad is written in the Torah with a large dalid, romes la'arba imahos. This hints to us of the four matriarchs. The ayin rabasi, the mishma, and the large ayin, which is the last letter of the word Shema, the way it's written in the Torah, romes legimel avos. This hints to us about the three patriarchs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, are hinted to by the ayin, the large ayin. How can the letter ayin, how does the letter ayin hint to us about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Zera Shimshon explains, Avraham chesed. Avraham represented the midah of chesed, of kindness. Ayin gishorim shel chesed. And there are 70 bridges of chesed. Yitzchak din. Yitzchak represented judgment. Ayin Sanhedrin. And that's why that's alluded to with the fact that there were 70 members of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, had 70 members and was presided over by a 71st member who was called the Nasi, the leader of the Sanhedrin. Vehem sod ha'ayin zikenim. And this is represented in the Torah when Hashem tells Moshe to choose 70 elders to assist him and help him in leading the people. So you have this model from the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu plus 70 elders. That's like the Nasi and the 70 judges of the Sanhedrin. Yaakov, ayin nefesh yotze yerecho. And Yaakov Avinu, we are told there were 70 descendants. So at the time that Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, the family contained 70 people. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Mikubolim. Ve'ad osa sha'a, and until that moment, lo ra'a Yaakov ayin nefesh kulam biyachad. Never did Yaakov Avinu have all 70 members of his family together until that moment when Yosef appeared. Ume'ato shebo Yosef etzlo, and from that moment when Yosef came to be near him, to see him, nisyachadu kol hashivim, all of the 70 were united. Velochein, and therefore miyad kishero es Yosef, immediately when Yaakov saw Yosef, kedichsi vayera elov, as it says in the pasuk, Yosef appeared to his father Yaakov. Hischil likros es Shema. Yaakov began to recite the Shema. Kedei lahashlim hatikun vehayichud, in order to complete the rectification and the unification, shemutal alav, that was his responsibility, or that was placed on him, be'ayin shel Shema, because of the ayin in Shema. So amazing Perush from the Zera Shimshon. Yaakov Avinu is saying the Shema, and Yaakov Avinu understands that the ayin, the last letter of the word Shema, that ayin stands for many things and teaches us many things, and its larger size teaches us many things. And one of those things is to represent Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and to also represent the unification of the Jewish people. And when Yosef walked in, the Jewish people were unified. All 70 people were present, and therefore Yaakov Avinu felt this tremendous opportunity of being able to recite the Shema for the first time and fully be Mekayim the ayin, fully be able to fulfill the meaning of the word ayin, because all 70 people, all 70 members of the Jewish people were unified at that moment. So the Zera Shimshon, as we say, Agav Orcha, kind of incidentally along the way of explaining the pasuk and why Yaakov waited to say the Shema until he saw Yosef walk in and then begin saying the Shema, he's teaching us how important it is when we recite the Shema to study and to learn what are the different intentions and kavanos, what are the different things we should have in mind, what are the different symbols, both in terms of the regular laws and then the deeper laws and the deeper customs, what we should have in mind when we say the Shema. And here Yaakov Avinu grabbed the opportunity to say Shema in a fuller, deeper way that he had been able to before. And we should be zocha when we recite the Shema also to say it with great kavana, with great intention, and with the deepest kavana that we can have. And this should bring a merit to us and to all of Klal Yisrael. Yasher koach for joining in the learning in the Zera Shimshon this week. We look forward to learning again together next week.